So let me tell you what I learned from this movie, as far as this Michael Jackson movie. The damage that parents do to their children. It blew my mind. I felt like I was looking at my story all over again, my childhood all the way through, because it so much remind me of my life, and the fact that the way people hold people back to keep people from reaching their greatness, to keep people from walking away. Now it makes sense. When I tell you I was in tears when I seen this movie. When I tell you it reminded me of me, it ain't even funny how much this movie reminded me of my life. That's why I said I never thought he ever messed with kids. I never thought Michael Jackson messed with kids. I always knew that there was something behind that because Michael Jackson was a perfectionist. I don't think that without music, I don't even know what he would have done. And he was a very phenomenal individual. And he was one of the sweetest people you would ever meet. And the fact that people wanted to hold him back, keep him in a childlike mind is sad. But yet the rest of his siblings were able to grow up. They were able to get married. Joseph did not want their boy to get married. He did not want him to grow up. He wanted to keep him in a child mind. He wanted it where Michael would only benefit him. Let me explain why I say that. There's a part in the movie where Barry Gordy is showing Michael how to do music. And so when he came in there, Joe was like, that's it for now. And Barry Gordy looked at him. But Barry Gordy noticed something that I noticed. The same thing, the same type of manipulation, the same type of, control. So you saw it because when Michael did Off the Wall, and Joseph was like, this is, about the Jacksons, so on and so forth. That was Michael's album, not the Jacksons. Michael wasn't even able to go on tour because Joseph made it about the Jacksons. And a lot of people did not know that it was not that simple for Michael to walk away. Because Michael had, even despite everything that Joseph did to him, not only was he scared of that man, he felt loyalty to that man. Because Joseph always threw it in his face that he'd have been nothing without him. And it was Quincy Jones and Barry Gordy that were the reason that Michael was able to get his freedom from his dad. Not only that, the fact that he just did not have a voice. I remember there was a scene in the movie, and I ain't gonna tell too much, where they had performed and Michael said, we did a good job. And Catherine said, Neil Lone's character said, go ahead and get ready for bed. And he was like, no, they're going to practice. He's like, do you know what time it is? And what about school? Yeah, school, everything was on the back burner so they could practice. But you can tell that Michael was treated so differently than the rest of them boys. And it was as if that's the only one they focused on was Michael. And then when Michael left, it was Janet. So my whole thing is now it makes sense when it comes to Janet. Now it makes sense. Why she did Control, why she did what she did. Now it makes sense. That was the only way they would get their freedom. That's the reason why Jermaine ended up staying at Motown and he ended up leaving. The rest of them didn't leave. But instead of him trying to make something out of all of them, which he tried, but none of them was going to be nowhere near what Michael and Janet are and were then and now. So at the end of the day, like I said, they did it in a way that you really had to pay attention to notice it. But it explains why Michael, when it came to him feeling uncomfortable, when it came to socialization, he could only socialize with kids because he had a child like mine. Autism. Autism. And how I know? I have a child with autism. But my son was not autistic because he was forced to have a child like mine. He was born that way because of the fact of the umbilical cord and then medications. So that's another conversation. But yeah, for those of us who have autism children, we can see it just as clear as day. But most autistic kids are very creative. They're very talented. Just no differently than Michael Jackson was. So maybe he did have autism. We will never know because he was never tested. But based on what I saw, yeah, they kept him stagnant. Maybe they knew something we didn't. But at the end of the day, you also can tell when Suzanne walked up to Joe at the when they were performing at the fairground, and Michael walked up to that little girl and he talked to her and sung to her. You could tell that Michael wanted to date. You could tell Michael wanted to be in relationships, but he just wasn't allowed to. That was the only way that Joe could keep him conformist, keep him in a childlike mind. He did not want Michael to grow up. He wanted Michael to stay a child forever, to stay dependent forever. But he could not dim that man's light. No matter what Joe tried to do, Michael got bigger and bigger. And when that woman walked up to him about, the Jackson 5, they really didn't want the Jackson 5. They wanted Michael. And Joe said the only way you going to get, Michael is if you get the Jackson 5. He was never going to let Michael be on his own. But then when he realized that the only way they were going to get that deal is if Michael went solo, guess who else they remind me of? Toni Braxton. Toni Braxton do the same thing. Every time I think about that, I go back to Toni Braxton. Because Toni Braxton in the same situation. She is. It's all about her sisters. And Evelyn did the same thing to Toni Braxton that Joe did when it came to Michael Jackson. Boy, you can compare them two. If you compare Toni Braxton's situation to Michael, you'll see it. Because Toni did not want to do the Braxtons. Her mama made her do it. And like I said, when you have a child that has a talent the way Toni and Michael was, the fact that she tried to make Toni bring her sisters involved is crazy to me. But that's what it was when it came to Michael too. Especially the victory tour, he never wanted to do it. If he'd never did that victory tour, none of the drug issues that he had would have ever happened. None of what happened to his hair, the pigmentation, none of that would have got bad, but it wouldn't have got as bad as it was. And his face was worse. So yeah, it's a shame. But they did get into the pigmentation a little bit, that he had it before when he was younger. But it was good. That was a good movie. Boy, when I came in the house, I just looked at my child and I just said, I got the best kid in the world. Because, Lord, me and my mom was sitting there talking about this, and she said, yeah, honey, the stuff that Joe did to Michael, yeah, that's why he had a child like mine. Joe kept him by himself. He didn't want nobody influencing Michael. He didn't want nobody to make him go against him. And that right there is a lonely life to live. It is a lonely life to live. But when I tell you that it got me thinking about my life, and I was like, Lord, I busted out crying. Cause you really felt bad for him in that movie. You did. You felt bad. You was like, dang, this whole entire time we've been thinking that he was doing all this stuff. Come to find out, that wasn't even true. He had a child like mine. So when it came to the world and stuff, he had to learn as he went. So, and he still had that child like mine. And like I said, he was starting to come into his own. And then he had kids of his own. So we really didn't get into that. But they did a phenomenal job. That cast deserves an Oscar. If they don't get no awards come award season, there's something wrong. But that movie was good. It was good. I'm telling you, it's going to make you look at Michael Jackson a whole different way. It really, really is. And it's going to make you cry. And the music was phenomenal. Everything was good. 10 out of 10. But I had to do a part two.